Hi, this is Beth Billings from Around the Table Yarns. Today is May 13th, and it is the uh, 5th of our episodes on sweater knitting. We're doing the Quintessential Cardigan from Churchmouse Yarns and Teas. Today we are going to be setting in the sleeves. And once again, I have the sample from one of my class participants from this morning, who very kindly allowed me to use hers because I did mine in black, because that's a great idea. So I'm going to go ahead and get set up in front of me with my camera. Just make sure that my camera is not turned on. Hold, please. Why isn't my camera being recognized? No, no, no. Hold, please. All right. So setting in sleeves is tricky and fun because it is a combination of different techniques that you do for the mattress stitch. So first of all, I'm going to show you, these are the two yarns that Suzanne used for her pattern, and they're both perfectly good in terms of their strength for seaming. And we talked about this maybe a little bit in the last episode when we seamed the shoulders, but there are some yarns that do better for seaming than others. And so these are both perfectly strong yarns, but because she knitted both of them together in her project, I'm only going to pick one of them to do my seam with, and I'm going to let you guess which one. Is it the mohair or the silk blend? And I hope you say the silk blend because that's the one I'm going to pick. The mohair is strong and certainly would make a very durable seam, but it is fuzzy, so fuzzy. So we don't want fuzzy seams. We want smooth seams. When we are taking a length of yarn for the seam, we want to, I'm going to turn this so it is facing the correct direction. Yes. All right. We want to take a length of about 18 inches. It can be a little bit longer, but you don't want to use too long a piece because it wears as you use it. So drawing the stitches in and out creates wear because the whole length of the thread has to be drawn through every stitch. And that eventually with weaker yarns, tweed yarns, single plies are particularly notorious for this. That will make them a little bit more worn out, and they might actually break while you're doing the seam. We started this seam earlier today on the shoulder, and I just want to show you what the finished seam looks like and talk a little bit about how, so this isn't all the way finished. I have to do the other side of it, but we've started it here. And there are a couple of things that you should know about this sleeve. One, the pattern says that the front seam or the shoulder seam is slightly forward, ever so slightly forward. In other words, it doesn't sit at the top of the shoulder, it sits in front of the shoulder. And that has to do with a design that takes into consideration the contours of the human body. So because of that, the seam is not exactly in the center of the armhole. It's slightly forward of the armhole. And so in the pattern, it tells you to find the center of your sleeve, which Suzanne did, and I can show you on this side. She found the center of the sleeve by looking for the 8, in her case, bound off stitches at the top, and then figuring out where that was, and then you move 2 stitches towards the front. So 1, 2 towards the front and place a marker. That's where the top of the shoulder of the sleeve cap will line up with the seam. So just to say that again, you find the center of the top of the sleeve cap where the bound off stitches are. The center is the top of the shoulder, and because the sleeve cap is offset from the center, you have to count 2 stitches in the direction of the front. So in this case, the front is over here on my right-hand side. So this is the center, and this marker is 2 whole stitches over, so that when you line it up, the center is really here, and forward on the shoulder is here. So they walk you through that in the directions. It's and somebody said, why? I said, because, but it's because this is following the contours of the human body more accurately. And so the designers have taken the shape of the body into consideration. You know, I'm saying that, and now I'm wondering if I'm wrong, because this is the front. Two, three, six. This is dead center. So actually, I think it should be here. I wonder if it was correct on the other one, but this feels like it should be 2 stitches over. So there's 16 stitches across. So it should be 6 stitches from this side. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Because that is the center seam, and it is sitting forward. Okay. So Suzanne actually used locking markers, and she took the edges of her underarms, and you can see they've been pinned in, and she pinned in the center or the seam. So I'm going to pin that in. And then she took locking markers in between in regular intervals. And as Suzanne said, she tried to follow where, like down here, it's stitches to stitches in the underarm, and then stitches and rows together. And so she tried to sort of lay it out in an even way so that the sleeve fits into, I think I've changed, no, maybe not. I think that's actually fine. So that the sleeve fits into the armhole of the sweater. The reason that I like this, and I agree with this technique, is because we're going to start at the top and work down towards the armpit. So whenever I do a seam on the side of a sweater, I work towards the armpit, because if we're off, if there's any misalignment, I want it to be in the least noticeable place, and the least noticeable place is in the armpit. I'm going to cut a length of yarn long enough to sew the whole seam, and I'll join it here to start with, and then use half of it to go this way, and the other half I will turn the work around and go that way. I'll turn the work around because I always work from right to left, so I'll start with this side first, and then I'll turn it around, and I'll work with the yarn in the center and go from right to left to finish the seam. We did, as I said, we did this earlier in the day in person, and it came out just beautifully. And I would just want to show you you can sort of see the direction of the rows of stitches and how they go diagonally across here. and then a little bit more diagonally until you get to the top, and they're going stitch. So they're at the top, it's the rows of stitches going into rows this way. So they're completely perpendicular up here, right there, going in and going across. But as you come down the diagonals, they start to be a little bit less perpendicular, until they are turned all the way around and going straight in. So all of this transitioning, what I said to the class and what I'm saying to you now, this is a craft. This is an art form. When we make our stitches in the seam, we want our stitches to be an actual stitch width apart. So I'm holding my thumbs on either side of an actual stitch. Sorry, that's an actual stitch. So I'm about 1/4 inch there. That's how big a stitch I want to make in my seam. And sometimes you're going to find that you can make it exactly where you want to make it. And sometimes you're going to find that there's a little bit of an opening or a pull, and you might have to find a slightly different place to put your needle. And we're going to talk about that as we do this other side. Also tonight, we're going to start to sew. I started here. We're going to sew rows to rows up the sleeve. And that's the same technique that we're going to use to sew the sides of the sweater together. And the point is always to work your seams from the edges that need to be lined up into the armpit, because if there's any misalignment, now hopefully when we're done, it will line up in a perfect cross, but if there's any misalignment, this is the place you want the misalignment to be, because that will not be visible out, to somebody looking at you. But if you got your edges wrong and they were misaligned, it would be very visible. Okay. All right, so I want to set this up, so I'm going from right to left. Maureen, if I go off camera, please let me know.
I will. I'm just tacking everything together as you're talking.
Okay. So here we are at the top of this seam. I'm going to zoom in a little bit. And I'd already set it and started in one direction. So I essentially just went under this stitch and went under this stitch and left it connected. So now I'm going to go back in. And start by going into, so I'm going along the outside of these stitches on the edge, on that side of the front. So I want to go to a similar place on the next.
Your camera is just slightly blurry.
It is active, so it is going to focus as we go.
Okay.
So wait for a second. So what we have here is a line that is the side of the stitches, and I want to stay on that line. Does that help?
Yes, it does.
Okay. And I want to go a stitch width. So when I'm working on the stitches, you can see that my needle has the 2 legs of that stitch over it. So when I'm going across the stitches, I'm always going to work both legs unless I'm trying to cheat a little bit. So generally speaking, we're going to try and work both legs of the stitch, but stitches and rows are not the same width. Stitches are wider than rows. And so typically, and we found this worked when I did this part of the seam, typically it's 3 stitches to 4 rows. That's a good place to start. Sometimes you find that it's 2 stitches to 3 rows or 4 stitches to 5 rows. But 3 stitches to 4 rows is usually a good place to start. So when I'm going in to the row side, so this is the edge of the rows, I'm trying to go in line 1 stitch deep into that part of the fabric. I'm putting my needle in alongside of the second stitch and running it perpendicular, and I'm picking up the running thread. So I go into this hole where I'm coming out of, I pick up the running thread that attaches this stitch to the stitch next to it. And I think of that as a single rung of a ladder. So 1 rung, 2 rungs, and then 3 rungs. So I've got, sorry, I'm going to pick up a 4th here because I want 4 rows to the 3 stitches below. Gently holding the other side of it, pull the stitches together, and you'll see that they join up very nicely. So this technique is called the mattress stitch. Now, as I come to the end of this, you'll see that there's kind of an opening here. I don't want, so my next stitch should be here, but if I go in there, it's going to just enlarge that opening when I use that as part of my seam. So I need to make a decision here. So I think what I'm going to do is just go under half of the stitch there and under 1 rung. So in where I came out of, keep my needle perpendicular to the, or parallel to the edge, and pick up 1 rung of the ladder. And then I should have gone in here, which means I should come out here. So because I didn't go in there, I'm going to go in where I came out of, and I'm going to still come out where I'm supposed to. And what I hope that's going to do is close up that hole. Like that. And then I go in where I came out of and under a full stitch there. And now I've done 2 up there, so I'm going to go 1, that's 1 rung of a ladder. I'm going to pick up 2 this time. I'm going to pull it to check, and I see that I'm getting a little bit of a buckle here. So I don't,
Is it really a buckle, or is it just the curve?
that's what I'm checking. So it looks a little bit like a buckle. So holding these as straight as possible, that looks a little bubbly. So I want to I think I would like to back up a little bit. I think I would do better if I eased more stitches on the row side in than I'm doing. So I'm going to pull back.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
You see that? That looks,
Yeah.
there's too much on that side.
Mm-hmm.
So I was telling everybody that I will redo a seam if it's not working exactly the way I want it to, because it's something of an art form and practice helps. And just working part of it and seeing, okay, that didn't look right. It makes a difference. So I'm going right back to here. And I think there's enough here for me to get them even without a big buckle, but I need to start back here to get that, to close that gap up so that this ends and they feel flush and they don't feel too stretched out. So that means I have fewer stitches on this side than I need to pick up on this side. So instead of doing 4 to 3, I'm going to do 3 to 2. I'm going to go under here. I'm going to re-thread my needle. So on the stitch side, I'm still going under a full size stitch, 1. But let's start with 2 on this side. Get us off to a good start. Now we're going to go under a full size stitch on this side, and we'll go under 1. And then a full size stitch on this side, and we're going to go under 2. So I'm alternating between going under 1 rung and 2. Here's 1 rung. Oops. I went into the hole. So this is the place where I'm not going to go all the way over. So I only want to go halfway through that so that when I make the next part of that stitch, I close up the hole. To check whether you've done 1 or 2 rungs, you can pull on this and pull on this. You'll see the rungs in the pulled stitches. So when I pull on this here, you can see that there are 1, 2 rungs underneath that. So I'm on a 1. I'm going to pull that closed. That looks a little bit better. So I'm going to go under into the row side and pick up just 1 rung of the ladder. And then on this side, I'm actually going to go under here. This is where I could have made my stitch before, but there was such a big opening. And so I'm going to skip all the way to the other side of the next stitch. And now I'm going to go under 2 at the top. I feel like should be here, actually. And then under 1 down here. Under 1. Under 2. And under 2. So that feels a little bit less buckly. There's still a little bit more on the row side, but I can just move that marker and work it in as I go along. So the technique of easing in your stitches that you are easing in your sleeves, like you might use in sewing, applies here. It's just hand sewn. So we also want to make sure it doesn't look really bubbly along here, and it doesn't. It looks pretty good. So let's keep going. So the same thing happened here. I want to make my next stitch, close that gap. See that sort of big opening? That's from the stepped shaping of the sleeve cap. And then this was a 2, so I'm going to pick up 1. So I go in where I came out of and under one rung. Under a whole stitch here. In where I came out of and under 2 rungs. So I want to try and see that lining up more. Looks pretty good. So I'm going to add some extra rungs on the side, evenly spaced across, because it is still if I can't see where my yarn is coming from, I give it a little tug. It's coming from there. So I'm just going to inch along a little bit more closely. It's a funny part of the curve. Feels just a little bit extra on that side still. This isn't about as exciting as watching paint dry.
No, no, no. You're good.
So I still feel like there's a bubble here, and I'm still trying to ease it onto that side. I don't think it will help if I go backwards, so I'm going to keep going. But again, I'm going to keep trying to pick up more on the row side than the stitch side. So I'm picking up 2.
I know I watched Patty Lyons. Did you watch her video
On Friday?
of this? No, she has a sleeve video, set-in sleeve video, and she
Oh,
used a tailor's ham to
oh,
kind of help with the bubbling part of it, to kind of show
okay.
you where you're,
To create the rounding.
yeah, the shoulder, the rounding of the shoulder, where the weird connection of the rows and the columns
Was that
of the
on her
stitches.
Instagram videos or YouTube videos?
YouTube.
I'll have to go back and watch that.
Yeah. She made it look so absolutely simple, you know.
Mm-hmm. So again, I still feel like there's more on the far side.
Yeah, I know. That's what I was thinking too. I'm like, there are a lot of stitches on the shoulder.
Mm-hmm. We did not have this on the other side, but it may have a slightly different curve. I'm not sure. My grand dog is here, so we're going to have shenanigans
Oh,
behind me soon.
I tell you, she picked a lovely color.
She did. So this is the that purple that that I'm seaming with, and then a multicolor. There we go. That looks, see, now that's starting
Yeah,
to get
yeah.
into shape. So
Multicolor mohair.
a multicolor mohair. The aerial color is what it's called.
Mm-hmm.
I think part of it is just being willing to go gently and carefully,
Mm-hmm.
but I will watch Patty Lyons because she did a class for modern daily knitting that I took, and I'm 3/4 of the way through
Yeah,
watching videos of it.
it's, take a look. It might be worth pinning to this video.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so now I'm going to move that. Does she use removable markers to?
Yes, yes, she does.
And I was telling people earlier, you can have removable markers. You can also do it with just using waste yarn, like the yarn that you're seaming with, a
Oh,
smooth yarn,
yeah.
and
Mm-hmm.
you can just thread a needle and
Mm-hmm.
thread and attach them that way. I think I'm going to go 1 for 1 in this section because it looks like we've sort of turned.
And she talks about changing your tactics as you make turns on the shoulder too, of your ratios.
Yep. So now I feel like I'm more of row to row, or
Mm-hmm.
yeah, row to row. And so that means I can probably do the same number of legs under my needle on each side. And that brought me up pretty close to perfect. There, under there. I'm going to remove this marker before I do it, not after. I usually leave my stitches loose for up to about an inch,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes a little bit longer, and then I just pull them. I want to see what I'm doing as I go, but this looks pretty good.
That looks
Dan was
lovely.
like, I'm so glad you're doing my.
I don't know. That one we did last, was it December? I spent a whole day seaming the whole I just took the day off and I spent the whole day seaming the shoulders.
So now I have that opening again. I'm going to go under the stitch here in an effort to close it. So this is another way that you can close those openings. And now I'm going stitch to stitch. So I'm under both legs of the stitch here. I'm going to go under both legs of the stitch above. When I do stitch to stitch, it's sort of like when we did the shoulder seam, I want to stay as close to the bound off edge as I can get.
Mm-hmm.
And I go in where I came out of and under 2 legs. In where I came out of and under 2 legs. And that should get us close. I'm going to unpin this end because it should be all lined up now. God willing.
Mm-hmm.
And where I came out of and under 2 legs. So what we realized is that if we've all done our seaming, that the only thing really left is sewing on the buttons. So next
Mm-hmm.
month in June, we will sew on the buttons, and then we can talk about the next sweater and the characteristics. One of the things I noticed about the next sweater today was that the largest size is not very large. It only goes up to a finished measurement of 48 inches around. And so that's not a very inclusive size. Part of the reason for that is that the designer is deceased. And so I don't think she's been around for the size inclusive sort of revolution that's been having, but she's the kind of person who I think would have been size inclusive, and I think she tried to have a broad range of sizes. So I'm going to look at the pattern and see if I either need to have a separate pattern suggestion for people who want to do a larger size, or if I can add sizing, or if you also wanted to do it in a bigger gauge yarn.
Oh, okay.
When I'm done with this, I leave my tails until I'm all finished. When I am going in to do the finishing of the tail, I will weave it back and forth with a darning needle. So I'll go like 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 times. And then I will take the darning needle and I will intentionally go diagonally across that whole space, trying to split whatever yarn I can, pull it through to finish it, and then clip it close to that seam, about 1/4 of an inch. So if you think of 1/4 of an inch as the space between my thumbnails, that's not a very short piece compared to what some people might think they should trim their ends to. And the reason is, if you pulled it back into the seam, it should come flush with the seam. So I always trim leaving about 1/4 of an inch. You can trim it straighter if you prefer, but that's my recommendation. So
that's what I did last time, was I made sure I got everything into the seam when I did all the ends.
So this is the inside of this shoulder seam, and you can see everything looks pretty good. It's got a curve to it. Looks a little wrinkly as it's laying flat on my desk, but that you should be able to put somebody's shoulder in there. It is something that you should be very patient with. The other thing is, this technique of doing mattress stitching allows this yarn, if you do not split stitches, do you see how it gathers up?
Right.
I have not finished the end on the other side either. And with this, I could potentially pull this whole piece out. If I was unsatisfied with my stitching and I wanted to redo it, you can, with mattress stitch, you don't have to unknit the whole thing. If you really wanted to redo it, you could just pull the strand back to where you wanted it, or all the way out. So that's, I think, beneficial for using the mattress stitch. I know that there are other ways that people may have been told to seam. Crocheting a seam and also doing back stitch are 2 of them. Because you're working from the wrong side of the work, you can't see how it's turning out on the right side. So once I learned how to do mattress stitch, I never looked back. I've always done the mattress stitch for seams ever since. All right, so joining the ends, I just want to show you here. I've joined and I've started from the beginning of the cuff and started to go up. I'm going to join the beginning of the hem. But this is all going to be rows to rows. So the knitting is the same direction. That's not going head to head. It's not going diagonally in. It should be rows to rows, absolutely all the way up to the armpit, especially for the sleeve, because it's one piece. There should be no discrepancy between the sides, because you should have done your increases on the same row when you did your sleeves. And so that should be really, really straightforward to do. However, the sides of your sweater were not done at the same time. I have to find my sides. Hold, please. Okay. So here is the front and the back of my sweater. And I would like to join here and work in this direction. Now, sadly for Suzanne, I'm not going to do the whole thing, but I'm going to at least show you doing the ribbing and a few stitches into the body. And then that is going to be your homework to do your side seams and your under the sleeve seam after you've set in your shoulders.
Gosh, I forgot about those.
Yes, we have more seams.
Yes.
I like the structure that seams give a sweater.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not opposed to them. At least, not morally. I'm not opposed. I'm gonna just turn on a little bit more light. Does that wash it out too much, or is that okay?
No, it's good.
It's a little dark in my room. So Suzanne cared very much about joining so that it looks like it's part of the ribbing. So we're going to be very mindful of that. So I'm going to go in the center. I'm going to choose to be one full stitch in from the edge. And I'm going to go into this. So it's the purl bumps that I'm going to be picking up this time. And then I'm going to do the same thing on this side. I'm going to pick up the purl bumps. And that should create what looks like a rib on my finished edge. I start from outside and come in at the point where I want my so that's where I want it to be. So I'm going to come from the edge. I'm going to leave a tail long enough to weave in later. And I'm going to come from under the edge on this one. Once you've got them lined up on the equal edges, I go 2 rows at a time. So I go in where I came out of and up 2. In where I came out of and up 2. And I'm going to do that all the way up my ribbing to the top of the ribbing. So again, once I've gone about an inch, that, I'm going to fold my tail and gently pull. And that makes it look like there's a rib there. Now she may not, I don't know. I hope she likes that. I could be further over. That looks like half of a rib. And Suzanne's a little bit detail oriented. So
I don't know. Somebody's doing it for me. I'd be happy.
yeah, well, but she might not like that. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to pick a little bit closer to the edge on this side. I like where I am on the top side, but I don't like how this is looking here. So I just want to show you how easy it is to undo. Pretty straightforward. All right, let's get this started. I'm going to get this started 1/2 of a stitch further over on that side, and then in the same place on this side. I think that will be better. I can see it. So again, I'm going under 2 rows at a time, especially at this kind of a gauge. I don't see a reason to go under every single row. We'll have a perfectly lovely seam. two at a time, and it will save you some time. All right, let's see if that works better. I'm not sure if it's measurably different. Oh, yes, it is. Okay. Yeah, it looks like ribbing.
Nice.
If you pull it far enough apart. Okay, so we're gonna keep going. Again, under two, in where you came out of, under two, in where you came out of, under two. Hello, the grand dog. So, Grandma, pay attention to me. Remy, leave it. Leave it. My helper. My beautiful girl, my helper. Okay, as you come to the end of the ribbing, you can sort of pick where you want to go. Again, I want to stay about a stitch in from the edge, so I can angle into a position at the edge. And I'm going to do the same thing here, but I'm still going to go under two up the side. So when I do that, I put my needle in and I find two rungs of the ladder, and then I continue. Two rungs of the ladder and continue. And you pull that straight, it looks like that.
Nice.
And then you just keep going up to the armhole. So what I have found in my years of knitting is that sometimes there are more rows on the front or the back, which so is not happy. But if that's the case, then you kind of want to, so once you've gotten the ribbing done, that's a good point to check. Like, does this look like it's about the same length? And it does, in fact, look like it's about the same length. You could do the same thing that we did before, because again, these are two separate pieces that were knitted. You could, now presumably you've counted your rows or you've measured to make sure that they're the same length. But measuring is less accurate than counting rows when it comes to seaming. So you can put clips along here to hold it as you go, and you may want to do that. If you are easing things in, you really want to ease in a way that doesn't leave a noticeable bubble at the armpit. But if you had to have a bubble and it had to exist somewhere, the armpit is the best place.
Right. Mm-hmm.
All right. So that's our lesson for today.
Wonderful.
Next time is in June. I'm not sure what day. I never remember to look first.
Yeah, probably.
Are you looking?
That around the 17th, 18th.
The 17th, is that a Monday in June?
Yeah, I don't have my calendar. I'm kind of guessing.
I have a calendar. Hold, please. I will look at my calendar.
The 3rd is sock club, so.
The 3rd is sock club, so the 10th, so it'll be the 17th.
Mm-hmm.
Just month. Yep, it'll be on the 17th of June. So on that day, we will sew in the buttons and make sure that we're all finished with all the bits and that nobody has any other questions. And then we will talk about the Order of the Garter by Anna Maria Otvos, and I will have more information about size inclusivity for that.
Okay.
All right. Any questions?
Nope. I'm going to get everything pinned together and take my time and start sewing.
Wonderful.
You know, I'm an apprehensive sewer, so.
It's, I actually recommend doing it in the morning. if you're able to,
Mhm.
because daylight and fresh eyes are very helpful,
Mhm.
depending on your project particularly, but daylight and
Yeah.
fresh eyes. So,
There's
um,
there's a
if,
lot of stitches on this one, so
yeah, if it feels like it's too much at night, get up early and do it first thing in the morning.
yeah, I will probably do the majority of it in the mornings. So
Well,
I'm mostly done with my other projects, so this will take
a minute.
precedence to get this one done.
Great. Well,
Mhm.
congratulations.
Thank you.
And I'll see you next month, and then we'll talk more about the next sweater club.
Perfect.
All righty. Have a great
Alrighty.
rest of your evening.
You too.
Thanks. Bye bye.